Hey guys! So today we are factoring by grouping. Yay! Okay, let's do some examples. We'll just get right into it. Okay, so yesterday we talked about GCF. Remember, GCF is your greatest common factor. So we want to keep that in mind with today. If you don't factor out the greatest common factor, then you're going to have to do some more work. So always be keeping in mind your GCF. We're factoring by grouping, which if you notice on this worksheet, and then you have an additional worksheet to complete as well, but all of these have 4 terms. So we're going to just group the first 2 terms together and then the second 2 terms together. And it doesn't matter what you do. Like if you wanted to, you could rearrange it, but it's just already written like this, so we might as well leave it. Okay, so on number 1, we're going to group these 2 terms together, and we're going to group these 2 terms together. And I just wrote over the minus sign, so I'm really sorry. Anyways. Okay, we're going to take out the GCF on this first one. So I don't have another number in front of my v squared, but I do have 2 v's and I have 3 v's, so I have at least 2 v's in each of these guys. So I'm going to take out a v squared. And then I have to write what's left. Well, on the first part, I have a 6, and then I have 1v. And then I can't take anything, or don't have really anything left there for my v squared, but I need to put a placeholder, so we put a 1. Now, the thing about factoring with grouping is you are going to make 2 sets of parentheses. You're going to make this first set of parentheses, and then behind, you're going to make a second set of parentheses. You want both of these sets to match 100%. So if you notice in the second grouping, they each have a negative, so I'm going to take out a negative because they both have a negative, so you should take one out. And then 5 can go into 30 and 5, so my greatest common factor there is negative 5. Oh, sorry about the bell. Okay, then I put my parentheses, and what's left over when I take 5 out of 30 is I get 6, and then I still have my v because nothing happened with that. And then I changed my minus, I took that out, so I have a positive left over. And then when I take 5 out of 5, I have 1. Okay, so notice, again, this is super important. The left-hand parentheses and the right-hand parentheses have to match 100%. All signs, everything. Okay, now you're looking at this as a different way. We have, hold on, let me get another pen. Okay, there we go. So we have this whole term now that we're talking about. So this is now the first term because we're not separated by adding and subtracting anymore. It's separated by multiplication. And then this guy over here is our second term. So when you have 2 terms, you want to take the greatest common factor out of each term. Well, they should share whatever is in the parentheses, and that is your greatest common factor. So from each of these 2 terms that we now have, because this is now 1 term, and this is now 1 term, we are going to take out the greatest common term, or the greatest common factor, and that is 6v plus 1. Well, what's left over? Well, from this term, we have a v squared left over, and from this term, we have a negative 5 left over. So this is now our answer. We have factored our 4 terms into a multiplication problem. And if you multiply your fancy distribution or FOIL, whatever you want to do, then you will get what we originally started with. So I'm going to try this again because I can see how it's kind of tricky and it's brand new. So let's look at number 3. That was very similar to what we did on number 1. Okay, so we're going to factor by grouping, which means that these 2 terms are going to be in one group and these 2 terms are going to be in another group to start. Again, it doesn't matter which of the 4 you pick, but it's easiest just to do the first 2 and then the back 2. Okay, we're looking for the GCF between the first 2 terms. So the GCF between the first 2 terms is b squared. They don't share numbers, and 2 is the biggest number of b's that we can take out of the first one. Okay, so we write what's left in our parentheses. We have a 7, and we have another b. We also have a 6 in our second term, but no b left over there. So this is now, these first two terms have turned into this. That is a weird color. Okay, then we also have to do this side. So the greatest common factor over here is a -5. Because -5 is the biggest number that goes into both -30 and -35. And again, you want these parentheses to match, so it kind of gives you a hint. Well, what number times 7 will give me 35? 5. And then check it over here. What number times 6 is 30? 5. All right, so it's probably the GCF. Okay, so we're going to take a 5 out. We can't take out a B. Then if we take the 5 out of -35, we're left over with 7. We still have our B. And if we take the -5 out of the -30, we have a +6. Notice that these inside of the parentheses match. And again, these two must match. So now we're left over with two terms. We have this first term separated by an add or subtract gives us the second term. Okay, now we have to take the greatest common factor from both of these two terms, which is whatever was in the parentheses, because it should match 100%, times b squared minus 5, which is the leftover on the first term and leftover on the second term. Okay, let's do a little bit more so that you can see what happens. I want to do number 10. That's a good one. Okay, so these numbers are a tiny bit bigger, but it's totally fine. We're going to make it work, and it's going to be great. Let's focus. Oh, so good. Okay, we want the greatest number that can go into both 25 and 20. So that's 5. Also the n's, the greatest n that can go into both of them would be n squared. So we're going to take that out of the first two terms. Then we have to write what's left over. So 5 times 5 is 25, or whatever is left when you divide 25 by 5. And then I still have an n remaining. The same thing happens over here. I'm going to take a 5 out of my -20, which gives me a -4, and then I took out my n squareds. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing on this side. Okay, so I have a negative and a positive, so according to the last examples that I just did, we're going to leave it a negative for right now. From the 20 and the 6, the largest number that can come out of both of those is a 4. When I take my, oh, what? Heavens. Yeah. Hold on. Okay, sorry. I don't know why I changed that to a plus sign without explaining anything, so we're just going to leave that there. Now it's all better. All right, so when I take my -4 out of my -20 n, I'm left with a +5 and an n. And then when I take a -4 out of my 16 that's positive, I'm left over with a -4. The reason I wanted to show you something, sometimes these signs don't match. You'll notice that you'll have like a minus here and a plus here, and they don't match. And the way to do that is to change the sign that's in front of the second term. I'll try to find an example to show you. Okay, but ours, our inside of the parentheses match perfectly, so now that comes out in front, 5n minus 4, and whatever's left over from the first term, which is 5n squared, and whatever's left over from the second term, which is -4, get left over all together, and this is our answer. Again, if you fancy distribute, you'll get this. All right, let me see if I can find one of them. Here, let me mess up on 13 and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so 13, again, we start by looking at the first two terms and we want the greatest common factor. So I have 12 and -3, so I'm going to take out a 3, and then I have an x. So what's remaining on this first term is a 4 and a y, and then on the second term is a -x. Now I'm going, since these signs don't match, I'm just going to leave this as a plus sign, and I'm going to take out the greatest common factor here. So 5 is the number that's the largest number that goes into both 20 and 5. So that's why it's the greatest common factor. And then here I can't take out an x or a y, so I just leave it. And then when I take a 5 out of negative 20, you get a negative 4y. And when I take a 5 out of 5, you get a positive x. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. Notice that these signs don't match. It's negative, positive, positive, negative. They do not match, which just means that instead of taking a positive 5 out of here, I should have taken out a negative. And that would change these signs. So we're going to just draw the next line. We're going to keep this front stuff the same because nothing is happening with that yet. But instead of a plus 5, I'm really going to take out a minus 5, which changes this from a negative 4y to a positive 4y, and it changes my x from a positive to a minus. Now the back two match 100%, and that's what comes out. So I have 4y minus x and 3x minus 5, because those are from the two leftover pieces of the other terms. I'm going to do one more just to make sure we got this. It doesn't matter how many letters we have. Let's look at 17. Maybe that looks tricky. Okay, we have 12 and 2, so the largest number that can go into both 12 and 2 is 2. I have a b squared and a b squared, so we're going to take out a b squared and then a c and a d. So that's it. Okay, then when I take 2 from 12, I have 6 left over. B squared and b squared are gone, and I have my c. And then when I take 2 from 2, I have nothing left over. My b squared and my b squared cancel as well. I'm left with d. Then we're going to come over here. The only thing we have in common is our x's. I have a 6c left over and a d. Notice that 6c and d matches with 6c and d, so those come out as well. That's our greatest common factor of the two terms. And then of my first term, when I took 6d out, I'm left with 2b squared. And then of the second term, when I took 6c plus d out, I'm left over with x. Okay, if you have any questions, please let me know, and I can answer them. Have a great day. Bye, guys.